The first time Admiral Kethsurin saw a human maintenance crew eat, she almost filed a formal complaint with the Galactic Health Consortium. It wasn't the food itself, though the smell of whatever they were heating in that metal container was aggressive enough to count as a biological weapon under 3 different treaties. It was the casualness of it, the way they laughed with their mouths full, the way one of them, a short, broad-shouldered woman with close-cropped black hair, was simultaneously eating, reading a datapad, and apparently conducting a shouted argument with someone 2 corridors away. All at once, without dropping anything, Kethsurin pressed her secondary eyelids down and breathed through her filtering membranes. She was Vaythri. She had commanded fleets across the Rim Cluster for 11 years. She had negotiated surrender terms with the Drassel Collective while standing knee-deep in pressurized coolant. She was not going to be unsettled by lunch. She turned back to the observation window and looked out at the dry dock. The ship in Bay 7 had no right to exist. That was her professional opinion, and she'd been forming professional opinions about spacecraft since before most of these humans were born. The vessel was called the USCS Chianan, ISC hull number 7714J, and according to its registration documents, it was a Meridian-class heavy frigate with a manufacturing date of only 4 years ago. It looked like it had been assembled by someone who'd lost the instruction manual halfway through and decided to improvise. Sensor arrays jutted at angles that would interfere with each other on any ship Kethsurin had ever served on. The drive housing was 3 times larger than standard for a vessel this mass. And the hull had been repaired so many times in so many places that it was less a ship and more a philosophical statement about the nature of continuity. And yet, it had just outrun a Drassel pursuit wing at a speed that, by her navigator's calculations, was somewhere between impossible and please recalibrate all instruments immediately. Admiral, her aide, a young Vaythri named Yas, appeared at her shoulder. The human commander has agreed to meet. Docking Bay 7, at your convenience. My convenience, Kethsurin said flatly. His word, not mine. She went. Underscore. The docking bay smelled like scorched metal and something chemical she couldn't identify, sharp and almost sweet. Burn residue from the drive, she guessed. The Chianan sat in its cradle looking both battered and absolutely satisfied with itself, the way a street cat looks after a fight it technically won. The commander was waiting at the base of the boarding ramp. He was leaning against it, actually, one shoulder propped against the ramp strut, hands in his jacket pockets, watching her approach with the kind of expression that said he was paying attention but didn't want her to know how much. He was taller than she'd expected from the file photo. Korean, the file said, and his name was Yoon Jahun, and he had approximately 47 disciplinary notations in his service record, which for a human officer was either alarming or impressive depending on your perspective. Admiral Kethsurin. He pushed off the ramp and offered his hand, palm down, the way humans did. Commander Yoon, welcome aboard. I haven't boarded yet, she said. Technically you're in my docking bay, so... He smiled. It did strange things with his face. Asymmetric, like most human expressions, weighted slightly to the left. Can I offer you something? We have coffee. And Specialist Park made what she's calling space jjigae, which is regular jjigae, but with whatever vegetables survived the last 3 weeks. I didn't come to eat. No, he agreed. You came to ask how we did that. She looked at him. He looked back. Somewhere above them, someone was doing something to the ship's hull with a tool that produced a rhythmic anging sound. Yin didn't react to it at all, the way people don't react to sounds they've stopped hearing. You ran from Drassel Pursuit Wing 7, she said. Standard intercept formation, for ships, combined mass of approximately 40,000 tons, current generation drives. You were in a frigate. You outpaced them by a factor of 1.4, he said. 1.47. Was it? He seemed genuinely interested in the correction. We don't have great sensors for measuring our own speed during a push. The instruments get weird. The instruments get weird, she repeated. It's a heat thing. The drive runs hot, and it messes with some of the readings. He tilted his head toward the ship. You want to actually see it? I can have Chen walk you through the drive bay. This was not how these conversations usually went. Kethsurin was supposed to be interrogating him. She'd written her questions out that morning, sequentially, with follow-up prompts. Yes, she said, before she'd consciously decided to. The inside of the Qianin was exactly as chaotic as the outside had suggested. The corridors were narrow and busy and smelled of coffee and industrial lubricant. Every wall had something attached to it, spare components in magnetic brackets, laminated procedure sheets that had been annotated by hand, a paper calendar with drawings on it that Kethsurin was fairly certain were not regulation. The crew moved with a kind of loose efficiency that took her a moment to parse. They were not moving fast. They were not moving in straight lines. They were talking to each other constantly while they moved, and somehow nothing was getting in anyone's way. She had to stop in a junction to let two engineers carry a component roughly the length of her torso around a corner. "Sorry, ma'am," one of them said, to her specifically, meeting her eyes for exactly the right amount of time, then continuing on without slowing down. Yin was watching her watch his crew. She cog. HT him doing it, and he looked away immediately, which she found interesting. The drive bay was at the aft end of the ship, and it was large. Disproportionately large. She'd noticed this from outside, but standing inside it was different. The drive assembly occupied almost 30% of the ship's total internal volume, which was an engineering decision that made no sense for a combat vessel and every sense for something that needed to move very fast. It hummed. Even powered down, it hummed. A low-frequency vibration she felt more in her chest than heard with her ears. The engineer named Chun was a compact woman with her hair pulled back and a smear of something dark across one cheekbone that she hadn't noticed or hadn't bothered to address. She explained the drive system in approximately 3 minutes, using her hands to sketch diagrams in the air, occasionally swearing mildly when she had to double back and clarify something. The core principle, as far as Kethsurin could understand it, the humans had removed the drive's safety limiters. All of them, Kethsurin said. Well, Chen exchanged a brief look with Yun, who had been leaning in a corner this whole time with his arms folded. Most of them. The ones that remain are mostly the ones that keep the hull from actually tearing apart, Yun said. Mostly, Chen agreed. Kethsurin thought about this. She thought about the Drassel pursuit wing and the formation they'd been flying and the physics involved. What's your maximum sustained push before the drive needs to cycle down? Theoretically, Chen said, or the record we've actually hit. Both. Theoretically, we shouldn't be able to do what we did today. The record is, she looked at Yun, who held up 4 fingers, 4 hours and 12 minutes at 1.3 over. Then we had to stop, because the port drive strut was starting to make a noise that Commander Yun described as unhappy, Yun said. An unhappy noise. Kethsurin looked at the drive. E-assembly. The drive assembly hummed back at her, placidly. And your crew is comfortable with this? Comfortable's a strong word, Yun said. They're familiar with it. There's a difference. She thought about her own crew, who trained in simulators and followed procedure documents and filed damage reports in triplicate. She thought about the Drassel wing, which had broken formation and turned back at the edge of the debris field rather than continue pursuit. Not because they couldn't catch the Qianin, because they'd looked at what the Qianin was doing and decided it wasn't a thing they were willing to match. She understood that choice perfectly. She was standing inside the Qianin right now, and she was still not sure she wanted to be here. Underscore. She came back the next day, which she hadn't planned to do. Her official reason was to review the maintenance logs from the chase. The Qianin had sustained minor hull damage during evasion, and as flag officer she needed to assess whether the vessel was flight-ready. This was true. It was also thin, and she suspected Yin knew it was thin, but he didn't say so. He showed her the logs without comment, answered her questions without looking smug about it, and then asked if she wanted that coffee. She said yes before she could stop herself. Again, it was terrible coffee. She didn't know enough about the substance to identify what made it terrible. She'd only had it twice before, at diplomatic functions where it had been very expensive and presumably good. This was not expensive or good. It was hot and dark, and it tasted like something that had strong opinions about being awake, and she drank it in the small officer's mess while Yin sat across from her and ate something he called toast, which appeared to be bread that had been exposed to heat until it resented the experience. You're going to recommend us for the outbound fleet rotation, Yin said. Not a question. I haven't decided. SH. He had. What makes you think so? Because you came back. He scraped something out of a jar onto the toast. And because you're the kind of officer who does reconnaissance before she commits. You've read my file. You read mine. He smiled again. That asymmetric thing. Up close it was more noticeable. The left side of his mouth moved faster than the right, like two different thoughts trying to express themselves simultaneously. 47 notations. Most of them from admirals who wanted me to do things more carefully. Did they have a point? Sometimes. He ate some toast. Not today. Today you ran from a fight. Today I made a strategic decision to preserve my vessel and crew for a situation where engaging would have been tactically useful. He paused. Which is also what I said in my report. Which is also what you said in your report, she confirmed. They sat with that for a moment. Below them, through the deck plating, felt more than heard. The drive hummed its low, contented hum. The Drassel aren't going to try that intercept point again, Kethsurin said. But they'll adjust. Wing 7 knows now that a human ship can outpace their pursuit craft. They'll compensate. They'll compensate by using more ships, Yin said. Yes. So we'll need to be faster. Or better at other things. He looked at her over his coffee cup. His eyes were very dark, and he had a habit of going still when he was thinking. Not the polite stillness of someone being attentive, but the actual physical stillness of someone whose body had temporarily forgotten to perform background activity. It was disconcerting. The Vay-3 were rarely still. Their biology didn't really support it. What other things, he said. That's what I'm trying to determine. She set her cup down. I've been reading the Chianin's engagement history for the past 3 years. You have 11 recorded instances of successful evasion from superior forces. You have 6 recorded instances of engagement, with forces that should have been able to defeat you. The engagement records are classified at. I'm an admiral. Right. He ate more toast. Yes. 6. You won 4 of them. We survived all 6. Surviving and winning. She thought about the distinction and decided not to press it yet. How? He was quiet for a moment. He had a small scar on his chin, pale against his skin, that she'd noticed yesterday and kept noticing. The kind of thing her eye returned to without her permission. Old injury, well healed, the kind that meant something about where he'd been and what it had cost him. The Chianin is not a normal frigate, he said finally. I noticed. No, I don't just mean the drive. Everything on this ship has been modified at some point. Most of the modifications were mine. Some of them were my predecessors. A few of them were the crew's, and I didn't technically authorize them, but they worked out. He stood and went to refill his coffee, and she noticed he poured hers without asking. Automatically, the way you do for someone when you've decided they're staying. The ship thinks. Not like an AI. More like, you know when you've lived somewhere long enough that you know all the sounds it makes? The normal sounds versus the something's wrong sounds. I know the concept. The Chianin is like that. The crew knows every noise she makes. Every vibration. We have specialist Lim who sleeps in the aft corridor because the drive hum in that section helps her sleep, and she says she can tell just from how it changes whether we're about to have a problem. He sat back down. That's not in any maintenance manual. It sounds like a liability. It saved our lives twice in the Orove action. She thought about that. She thought about her own flagship, the TVS Meridian. Wait, wrong name. That was a ship class, not her flagship. The TVS Cerolith, for times the Chianin's mass, crewed by trained professionals who followed procedures and filed reports and had a chain of communication so well established that any message took 3 stages to reach her. A good ship, a reliable ship, a ship she knew completely, and the Cerolith had never outrun a Drassel pursuit wing. Underscore. The summons came on day 6. Not from her own command, from the Galactic Transit Authority, which meant it was a political thing, which meant it was going to be complicated. A Drassel diplomatic vessel had filed a formal complaint about the Chianin's behavior during the Orova Passage incident. The complaint used words like reckless and destabilizing and implied strongly that the humans were doing something that the Drassel found alarming, though the complaint declined to specify exactly what, which Kethsurin read as, "We don't want to admit we were scared." She was reviewing the filing in her office when Yas knocked. Commander Yun requests a meeting. He's here. He's been here for about 20 minutes. He brought coffee. She shouldn't have let him in. She had work to do, and he was officially the subject of a diplomatic complaint, and she was the officer responsible for managing that complaint, which created a conflict that her ethics training was very clear about. She let him in. He set the coffee on her desk, a sealed travel container, hotter than the station dispensers managed. I heard about the filing. It's not your concern. It's about my ship and crew. It's a diplomatic matter, Commander. I'll handle it. He didn't sit down. He stood in front of her desk with his hands in his jacket pockets, which she'd noticed was his default posture for conversations he hadn't decided how to have yet. They want the Chianin grounded. They want the Chianin operated under additional oversight. That's the same thing. He said it flatly, without heat. You know that's the same thing. She did know that. She also knew she had 17 reasons to agree with the filing and at least one reason. The Drassels manifest this. Comfort with a ship they couldn't match, to disagree with it profoundly. The filing has merit, she said. The drive modifications you're running haven't been cleared for. They've been cleared by the people who built them. They haven't been cleared by anyone who isn't you. And if they get cleared by someone who isn't me, that someone is going to require we add safety limiters. He pulled one hand out of his pocket. He had a small healing burn on the back of it. Thermal injury, a few days old, the kind you get from working close to something very hot. She'd noticed it 2 days ago. She kept noticing it. And then we'll be a normal ship. Is that a bad thing? Normal ships, he said carefully, get caught. The room was quiet. The station's air systems produced a low constant sound, different from the Chianin's drive hum, but occupying a similar frequency. And she was suddenly aware that she'd started comparing the two. That was not a thing she should be doing. I'll review the filing, she said. That's all I can promise. He looked at her for a long moment. That stillness again. Okay, he said. Then, thank you for not just agreeing with them. She hadn't not agreed. She'd delayed. There was a difference. She didn't correct him. Underscore. The review took 4 days. The result was not what the Drassel wanted, which was not entirely because of Keth Surin's advocacy, but she had spent 6 hours on a call with the GTA, citing precedents and operational necessity, until the reviewing panel agreed that additional oversight did not have to mean additional restriction. The Chianin was assigned a liaison officer, herself, as it happened, because the fleet rotation required exactly that assignment, and she had not gone out of her way to arrange it. Not really, and permitted to operate under its existing specifications pending a full technical review that was scheduled for 8 months from now. 8 months. Yin found out through OFFI SIL channels before she could tell him personally, which she'd intended to do and had been delayed in doing by the call running long, and then another call, and then Yas needed to review 4 forms with her, and somehow it was 0200 station time. She was coming back from the communications center when she nearly walked into him in the corridor. Commander. She stopped. He stopped. They were in a junction in the admin sector, alone, the corridor lights dimmed for ship night cycle. I was going to tell you. I know, he said. I got the notice an hour ago. And he was quiet for a moment. His expression was doing several things at once that she couldn't fully read. Her understanding of human facial expression was functional, but not fluent. Thank you, he said. For real this time. That took work. It's my job. Keth Surin. It was the first time he'd used her name without the title, and he seemed to realize it immediately after. She saw his expression shift, recalibrate. Admiral. I know it took work. She was tired. She'd been in meetings for 6 days straight, and she hadn't slept enough in 2 of them, and she was standing in a dim corridor at 0200 having a conversation she hadn't prepared for, which was rare. She was not accustomed to not being prepared. You're going to do something reckless again, she said. At some point, you're going to make a decision about your ship that my ethics training will require me to document. Probably. And I'm going to be there when you do. Probably. He wasn't smiling this time. He was doing the stillness thing. Is that a problem? She thought about the Seraph, reliable and known and perfectly suited to the work she'd been doing for 11 years. She thought about the Chianin, improbable and loud and manned by people who slept in corridors because of the hum. She thought about a Drassel pursuit wing turning back from a chase it should have won, because something about what it was chasing had scared it. No, she said. I don't think it is. Underscore. The first joint operation was a navigational survey of the Kelf Passage, which sounded boring and was. The Chian and Rand scanned paths that the survey drones couldn't manage because the area's electromagnetic interference was too strong for automated systems, and Kethsurin observed from the Serolith and reviewed data and filed reports and was, in every professional sense, doing exactly what a liaison officer should do. She was also, approximately every 40 minutes, finding a reason to check the comm channel. Chianin to Serolith. Yun's voice, a little distorted by the interference. We're picking up a resonance pattern at grid K7 that doesn't match the survey map. Could be natural, could be a structure. Recommend you log it and continue, Kethsurin said. We're on a survey timeline. A pause. Logging it, he said. Continuing. Another pause. It's a really interesting resonance pattern, though. Log it. Logged. Yas appeared at Kethsurin's shoulder with an expression of careful blankness that meant she was trying not to have an opinion. The resonance pattern at K7, Admiral. Should I flag it for priority review? Yes, Kethsurin said. They passed through the passage, and the resonance at K7 turned out to be a partially collapsed station from a civilization that hadn't existed in about 800 years, which was historically significant but not tactically relevant, and therefore fell outside the survey's scope. Kethsurin filed it with the Archaeological Consortium. She mentioned to Yun that she'd filed it. Told you it was interesting, he said. You're insufferable. I hear that a lot. He didn't sound bothered by it. She was starting to understand that he didn't get bothered by things the way other officers did. Not because he was indifferent, but because he'd made some decision at some point, maybe multiple points, to let things land without letting them stick. He wasn't sure if that was wisdom or something that had cost him something. Maybe both. She asked him about it once, late in the survey mission, in the Chianin's mess during a stretch of quiet where there was nothing pressing to do, and both of them had ended up in the same place with coffee at the same time for reasons that were definitely coincidental. You don't seem bothered by things, she said. I've been watching you manage your crew for 3 weeks. Things go wrong and you adapt, but you don't. Spiral, he said. I was going to say catastrophize. Same thing. He looked at his cup. I used to. Ask anyone from my first posting. I was a nightmare. Couldn't sleep before an operation. Would rewrite mission plans 6 times, and then still think I'd missed something. He turned the cup in his hands. The Chianin fixed it a little. The ship. The ship doesn't care what I think is going to go wrong, he said. It's going to make noises and run hot, and Specialist Park is going to cook something that smells like a chemical weapon, and Lim is going to wake me up at 0300 because she heard something wrong in the aft drive. And we're going to be fine or we're not going to be fine. And the thing that determines which one is whether we know the ship, not whether I've worried about it enough. Kethsurin thought about this. That's either very wise or a coping mechanism. Can it be both? She thought about the 47 notations in his file. She thought about the 4 engagements he'd won and the 2 he'd survived and the 1 station record that noted demonstrated willingness to accept personal risk in defense of crew and language that managed to be both commendation and concern. Yes, she said. I think it can. He looked at her then, direct, the way he did when he was actually paying attention rather than performing it. You're not what I expected, he said. From a V3 Admiral. What did you expect? Someone who would have grounded us already. I consider. Edit. What changed your mind? She thought about the pursuit wing. She thought about the hum. She thought about standing in a dry dock looking at a ship that had no right to exist and feeling something she'd eventually identified as recognition. Not of the ship, but of the principle it embodied. The decision to go further than the specifications allowed because the specifications hadn't accounted for the situation. You outran them, she said. That mattered. He nodded slowly. It usually does. Underscore. The Drassel came back 6 weeks after the survey mission ended. Not Wing 7. Wing 7 had apparently filed their own reports, and someone in the Drassel chain of command had drawn the correct conclusions. They sent a cruiser group instead. For vessels, heavier than pursuit craft, equipped with the kind of drives you use when you want sustained chase capability rather than sprint speed. They intercepted the Chianin at the edge of the Kelf Passage while Kethsurin was still en route with the Seraph. She heard about it in real time. That was the thing about being a liaison officer. She had a direct channel to the Chianin's bridge, and Yun had left it open. 3 at bearing 27 Mark 4, and the 4th is trying to come around our aft quarter. His voice was level, completely level, the way you go completely level when leveling is a choice. Lim, what's the drive sound like? Happy. Lim's voice, slightly out of breath. She's happy. Good. Helm, I want a course that takes us through the debris field at K7. Maximum push, 60% limiter. Kethsurin was doing math in her head. 60% limiter meant the drive was running at 40% above its rated maximum. The debris field at K7, where the collapse station was dense enough that the survey drones had refused to enter it. A Drassel cruiser group would not follow a ship into a debris field at those speeds. Possibly because it was tactical. Why inadvisable? Possibly because it was also simply insane. Commander Yun. She kept her voice steady. Report. Oh, Admiral. A brief pause, during which she heard background sounds. Engines, someone calling out coordinates, something mechanical happening that she couldn't identify. Didn't realize you were on. For Drassel cruisers. We're going through the field. I can see that. What's your plan after the field? Depends on what they do. He said it the way she said it's my job. Matter of fact. Not reassuring, but not alarming either. If they follow us in, we go to 80% and we lose them in the wreckage. If they don't follow, we come out the far side. They've lost angle, and we're clear. And if they wait outside the far side of the field, then I'll need a new plan. A beat. I'm pretty good at new plans. She wanted to say something sharp and professional about operational communication protocols. She couldn't think of what exactly. Don't get killed, she said. Silence on the line for a moment. Then, quietly, so she almost missed it under the engine noise, I won't. The Chianin went into the debris field. The cruisers did not follow. Kethsurin listened to the open channel for 11 minutes. Drive hum. Crew communication, the creak and groan of a ship under stress being commanded by someone who knew every noise it made. And at the end of 11 minutes the Chianin came out the far side of the field and the cruisers, who had gone around, had lost angle completely. The Seraph arrived 43 minutes later to a debris field full of baffled Drassel cruisers and a battered frigate sitting in open space with its running lights on, waiting. Kethsurin boarded the Chianin without requesting permission, which was technically outside protocol. Nobody stopped her. Yin met her in the corridor outside the bridge. He had a cut on his temple that someone had cleaned and sealed, and his jacket was off, and he looked like a man who had been holding something together by willpower for the past hour and was only now allowing himself to stop. He didn't say anything when he saw her. He just looked at her with that specific stillness, and she thought she understood it better now. Not absence of feeling, but presence of something that didn't have a word for it yet. The drive took a hit, he said finally. Not bad. Lim already has people on it. And the crew? 2 injuries. Minor. Park's cooking, so. He smiled. Tired, that asymmetric thing. We're okay. She had a report to file. She had a Drassel diplomatic complaint to preemptively deflect. She had 17 procedural steps to take, in order, and she was aware of all of them. She took 1 step forward instead, and she put 1 hand on his arm, not the injured side, the other one, the way she'd seen humans do with each other. Contact that meant I am here. You are here. This is fine. He went very still. Then, slowly, he turned his hand and covered hers with it. You scared me, she said. Just that. Yeah. He looked at her hand, then at her. I'm sorry. Don't be. Do it again. She hesitated. Just tell me beforehand, next time. I'll try. Something shifted in his expression. Not the smile, something quieter. It's easier, knowing someone's listening. She thought about the open channel. 11 minutes of engine sounds and crew voices, and the Chianin making her noises through a debris field at impossible speed. She thought about the fact that he'd left it open, and she hadn't asked him to. I know, she said. Understood. The technical review happened 8 months later, as scheduled. Kethsurin submitted 40 pages of operational data, 3 independent engineering assessments, and 1 very long personal addendum that outlined, in precise language, exactly why the Chianin's modifications should be formally approved and expanded upon in a dedicated fast frigate program for the human contingent of the fleet. The addendum was a little more passionate than she'd intended. Yas read a draft and raised both her eyebrows and said nothing, which was its own kind of comment. The panel approved the modifications. They did not approve the expanded program, which was expected, and which Kethsurin was already working on a plan to address. These things took time. You filed reports, you built records, you made the case slowly, and then you made it again, and eventually the evidence became impossible to ignore. Yun read the decision in the Chianin's mess, sitting across from her with his coffee and a datapad, and he made a sound when he got to the approval part. Quiet, exhaled, not quite a word. She'd learned to read his sounds, a little, the way you learn the sounds of something you've spent time near. This one meant relief, and something else, something she didn't have a category for yet. The expanded program's going to take another year, minimum, she said. I know. He set the datapad down. But the Chianin is fine. The Chianin is fine. He reached across the table and poured more coffee into her cup. Automatically, the way he'd been doing since the second day, the way you do for someone when you've decided they're staying. She'd noticed when it started. She'd been noticing things for 8 months, accumulating them. This small collection of moments and sounds, and the specific quality of his stillness and the cut on his temple that had healed to a faint line, and the 47 notations in his file that she now understood were all the same notation really, written different ways. This officer will not stop until the people he is responsible for are safe. I'm being reassigned, she said. End of the month. He looked up. Something moved across his face that he didn't try to hide. Where? Rim Cluster. Fleet Command. She kept her voice level. She was good at level. It's a promotion. That's good. Yes. He was quiet. The drive hummed below them. Somewhere aft, she could hear Park doing something in the kitchen that involved a great deal of clattering and at least one muffled expression that probably wasn't regulation language. The Rim Cluster has a human contingent, Yin said. It does. They don't have fast frigates. Not yet. He looked at her. She looked back. The Chianin hummed around them, steady and a little ragged and entirely itself. I'll put in for the transfer, he said. You'd have to reduce your notations. I've been working on it. She didn't say good. She didn't say I'd like that, or I was hoping you'd say that, or any of the things that were true and that she'd been carrying around for a while now. She said, bring your coffee. He smiled. That asymmetric thing, left side first, like 2 thoughts arriving together. Always do, he said. Outside the porthole, the stars held still and the station lights came on for evening cycle, orange and warm, turning the docking bay into something that looked almost, briefly, like a place where you could rest. Somewhere below them, the Chianin kept humming.